the 27th of July, 1944. Near St. Lo, Normandy, an 88mm shell tears through a Sherman's hull, a metal shriek that usually means 5 men have seconds to live. A Panther gunner watches, waiting for the flash and rolling black fire he's seen 100 times before. Only, nothing happens. No inferno. No fatal cook-off. The turret turns back hunting. Confusion freezes the German loader mid-motion. Every manual, every briefing from Russia to Africa said that tank should be a burning coffin. It isn't. What that Panther crew just witnessed was a quiet revolution the German army never saw coming. The Wet-Stowage Sherman. Prologue. A bad reputation earned in fire. In February 1943 at Kasserine Pass, American armor burned on the valley floor. M4 Shermans hit by 88 seconds, and long-barreled guns became crematoriums. Out of roughly 300 U.S. tanks engaged, 183 were destroyed. British operational research measured that 65% of knocked-out Shermans burned completely. American studies sometimes recorded up to 80% in specific engagements. Crews learned a brutal phrase, Ronson lights first time. Investigators dug into wrecks and data. The Ordnance Department's Tank Automotive Center came back with a stark finding. It wasn't gasoline that killed most crews. It was ammunition propellant. Sherman rounds, stacked in open racks around the fighting compartment, became instant incendiaries when hot fragments punched in. Kill the cook-off, save the crew. The idea that sounded absurd until it wasn't November. 1943. At a tank board meeting, a DuPont chemical engineer floats a simple, almost ridiculous idea. Surround the ammunition with liquid. Early sketches were clumsy: flood the compartment, build submarine-like cells. But the concept evolved fast. Double-walled ammo bins with liquid in the space between, placed low in the hull floor, away from common impact paths. If fragments got in, the liquid would flood out and smother burning propellant before it spread. By December, Press Steel Car in Pennsylvania was retooling. On the 3rd of January 1944, the first M4A 176W rolled off the line. That discrete letter W for wet barely registered outside the factory floor, but it would change survivability more than any extra millimeter of armor. Proof in flame and film at Aberdeen Proving Ground, U.S. Testers fired captured German 75 seconds and fearsome 88 seconds directly at ammo bins. Dry storage erupted in towering pillars of flame about 73% of the time. Wet storage burned only to 15% of the time, and even then, flames were brief, contained, and self-limiting. Classified films, later declassified, showed the difference viscerally. One test bay turned into a furnace, the other coughed a short, smothered puff. Designers refined the chemistry. Pure water froze. Add ethylene glycol, now it doesn't freeze but corrosion spikes. The final cocktail, Emudamp, an ethyl sodium potassium phosphate solution with rust inhibitors and biocides, stayed liquid to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, reduced corrosion, stopped bacterial growth, and improved fire suppression. Each 10-round cell had a 1.5-inch liquid jacket. A full Sherman carried 7,100 rounds in the floor, with 36-37 gallons of suppressant on board. The penalty, roughly 900 pounds of added weight. The payoff, lives, a silent fielding. By April 1944, about 130 M4A 176W Shermans had reached England. Training, gunnery familiarization, and logistics delayed their debut on D-Day, but they rolled into combat for Operation Cobra in late July. The 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions led with dozens of Wet-Stowage Shermans. Across the hedgerows, Panthers ambushed from sunken lanes and orchard edges and scored penetrations. And yet, over and over, Shermans that should have burned didn't. German after-action reports captured as Panzer headquarters fell showed rising confusion. Penetrations recorded, kills assumed only for many destroyed tanks to reappear within 24-48 hours, patched and to grow, fighting again. When a Sherman did burn, the hit was usually in the engine. Ammunition wasn't cooking off like before. The invisible math of war had changed. Why? The Germans missed it. German technical intelligence had done its homework in 1943. At Kummersdorf and elsewhere, they dissected M4A1S captured in Tunisia. Range cards and gunnery lectures drilled crews to aim at the sponsons above the tracks, where ammunition racks sat on older models. Schools at Putlos and Paderborn taught the same shot placement. Red boxed target areas appeared on range cards, and it worked then. But by early 1944, American factories had moved the ammo down into the hull floor and wrapped it in liquid. The Shermans looked the same on the outside. German intelligence pipelines, now frayed by defeat, inter-service rivalry, scarce fuel, and the urgent need to throw every captured vehicle back into combat, never updated the doctrine. Reports from units in Normandy that Shermans are not burning as expected were dismissed as stress or exaggeration. The enemy they thought they knew no longer existed, and no one told the Panther crews. Normandy, field test in the hedgerows. The bocage was a killer's playground for German guns. Short lines of sight, close-range ambushes, favorable angles. If Wet-Stowage were hype, Normandy would have exposed it instantly. Instead, U.S. maintenance battalions recorded astonishing recovery rates. During Cobra, Third Army's shops recovered and repaired to 67% of knocked-out Shermans. Tanks that would have been total losses in 1943 were rolling again in days. This wasn't just logistics. It was survivability. You can only repair a tank that hasn't burned to the ground and whose crew is still alive to fight another day. Numbers that don't add up until they do the USS. Army's Operations Research Office later quantified it in study OROT 117. Before Wet-Stowage, 60–80% of penetrations led to catastrophic fires. With Wet-Stowage, only 10–15% did. Imagine a battalion with 50 Shermans taking 30 penetrating hits. Under 1,943 conditions, 1824 would burn permanent losses, crews gone. With Wet-Stowage, only 3–5 burn. 25–27 are repairable. The battalion fights tomorrow. Multiply that across months and armies and you understand why German staff estimates of enemy strength remaining were consistently disastrously low. Case studies: Cobra, Mortain, Ericourt, the Bulge Operation Cobra, late July, 1944. 2nd and 3rd Armored Spearhead with Wet-Stowage Shermans. Panthers notch penetrations, but failed to collapse U.S. momentum. German diaries complain American tanks appear inexhaustible. Mortain divided by Operation Luttich, August 1944. German counteroffensive assumes U.S. spearheads are worn down. Intelligence misses the repaired and returned Shermans. The 30th Infantry Division's stand at Mortain, backed by resilient armor, shreds the attack. Ericourt, September 1944. The 113th Panzer Brigade hits 4th Armored Division hard. The Americans lose 151 Shermans on paper, but only 41 are total write-offs. 110 are repaired and back within about a week. German planners, counting all 151 as permanent losses, expect a crippled enemy and instead face a full-blooded counterpunch. Even Patton, initially skeptical of 76mm Shermans, pivots. Third Army leans into 76mm Wet-Stowage variants thereafter. The Ardennes divided by Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, January 1945. Hitler's last gamble assumes American armored reserves can be annihilated piecemeal, as in 1943. SS Kampfgruppe Piper and others report multiple penetrations at Stoumont and elsewhere, yet U.S. units keep fighting. The 761st Tank Battalion, the Black Panthers, exemplifies the new survivability. Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers fights on after multiple penetrations that do not ignite ammunition, an impossible outcome in older Shermans. Evolution on the March Easy-8s and Jumbos. As the Wet-Stowage fleet spreads, second-generation improvements arrive. M4, A3, E8, Easy-8, wider tracks, improved HVSS suspension for better ride and cross-country speed with the extra weight, refined floor ammo access. Begins reaching the front in October 1944. M4A, 3E, WWII Jumbo, a purpose-built assault variant, fielded from June 1944, that layers 4 inches of frontal armor and up to 6 inches on the turret plus wet stowage. In November, 1st Army fields to 105 jumbos, 3rd Army about 90. They spearhead brutal pushes through fortified towns, absorbing punishment that would have wiped out entire companies of earlier M4s. These tanks don't just survive single hits, they soak punishment, keep crews alive, and preserve combat momentum. Industry at war speed. None of this mattered without industry. Fisher Body and Grand Blanc switched lines from M4A2 to M4A3 and integrated wet stowage without halting production, stamping new hull floors, rejigging welds, rerouting hydraulics and electricals, redesigning the turret basket to access floor bins. Between February 1944 and March 1945, Fisher alone built roughly 3 7XXM 4A 375W tanks. Pressed steel cars started M4A 176W in January 1944 and produced 4XX by July 1945. By June 1944, American factories were essentially delivering only wet stowage Shermans. The transformation happened so cleanly that German analysts still working from 1,943 samples never updated their picture. Why intelligence failed stale samples. German labs studied pre-WREX from Tunisia. Defensive posture. From 1,944 on, fewer opportunities existed to haul enemy vehicles back for lab work. Bureaucratic friction, overlapping agencies, poor sharing, and a collapsing system. Resource starvation. Captured vehicles were thrown straight into combat use. Cognitive bias. Confidence in German technical superiority dulled curiosity. Invisibility. Wet stowage changed nothing visible outside. No silhouette shift. No new tactic required. Even elite memoirs, Otto Carius, Ernst Barkman never mention unusual fire resistance. Veteran unit histories from Panzer Lehr, 2nd SS, 116th Panzer, same silence. The revolution sat under the turret basket, sealed in phosphate solution. The math of survival, OROT 117's bottom line, bears repeating. Pre-W, 60-80% burn after penetration. 10-15% burn after penetration. Across the theater, conservative estimates say wet stowage prevented catastrophic burning in at least 1,000 tanks. That's to prevented. 5,000 crewmen kept alive while keeping dozens of battalions combat effective during decisive months. It didn't make the Sherman invincible. It made it recoverable. And, in a war of attrition and momentum, recoverable wins campaigns. What the Panther crew saw return to that summer hedgerow outside Saint-Lô. The Panther gunner stares through his sight, waiting for the orange blossom of a Sherman's end. Instead, he sees the turret swing back. The gun barks. The American tank lives long enough to shoot and to be repaired if it's hit again. The German crew is fighting yesterday's enemy with yesterday's assumptions. And in war, that mistake is fatal. Epilogue. The unshowy revolution. From January 1944 to war's end, every major U.S. armored operation from Cobra through the Bulge to the Rhine leaned on wet stowage Shermans. German forces captured and even operated some, never grasping what lay inside those floor bins. American engineers hadn't set out to fool the enemy, they set out to keep crews alive. The deception was accidental. The effect was decisive. Wet stowage validated a distinctly American wartime philosophy. Solve the specific problem fast, at scale. A practical fix fielded quickly can outweigh a perfect redesign that arrives too late. The Sherman's reputation will always invite debate. But the data is clear. Cut catastrophic fires by 3/4, and you change the battlefield quietly, relentlessly, irreversibly. The modification that didn't change the Sherman's silhouette changed the war's arithmetic. It won not by spectacle, but by survival, by turning certain funerals into second chances and shattered battalions into fighting forces again by next week. In 1,000 small moments where flames never rose, the Allies bought time, lives, and victory.